Christmas's biggest films, actor Ben Barnes tells us all about his role as King Caspian in Chronicles of Narnia, Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Labelled the Dark Queen of Song, singing sensation Camille O'Sullivan talks about bringing her sold-out 5-star Edinburgh Festival show to London for one night only. The brilliant poet Roger McGough will perform 2 seasonal poems to get us in the festive mood. Actor Graham Seed and programme editor Vanessa Whitburn discuss the 60th anniversary of Radio 4 series The Archers. TV critic Boyd Hilton has his recommendations for the best of the cultural television on offer this Christmas. We find out more about the work of the organisation Disability and Deaf Arts, which has risen from being a small local forum to arguably the world leaders in disability arts. Nick Duncalf reviews this week's film releases, including Burlesque and Tron Legacy, plus he looks ahead to the Christmas blockbusters, which will be hitting our cinemas over the next couple of weeks. And as this is the last Radio 2 art show of the year, we'll be looking back at some of our best guests of 2010. That's all to come on tonight's programme. Is the painting from the original motion picture soundtrack of one of this year's big family Christmas films, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the 3rd instalment in the Chronicles of Narnia series. Based on the fantasy novels of C.S. Lewis, in this adventure Edmund and Lucy find themselves swallowed by a painting and magically transported to a Narnian ship, the Dawn Treader. It belongs to Caspian, who's played by my first guest, Ben Barnes. It is a delight to welcome him to the art show. Thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure, thanks for having me.
That music, I've just watched the film, that music makes me feel like I am
Who would have Narnia on that painting?
Yeah, of course you did one before, but and there was a long space. We should say that this film came into being, because Disney had done the first 2 and then went, not sure about the 3rd one.
They went, they're expensive, aren't they?
Yeah, they're not cheap. And then 20th Century Fox came in and saved the day.
Yeah, it was fantastic and really good for me though, because I mean, obviously I'd come into this franchise, didn't want to get myself involved in the kind of studio politics of any of it. You know, that wasn't the interesting part of it to me, but it was actually nice for me to have that 3-year gap, because it meant that I could go away and do Easy Virtue, Dorian Gray, a few other little films, and sort of get more confident on a film set, because to go from playing this kind of bewildered running away prince all day to going to play this, a grown up. I mean, it was kind of muddied. It was teenagers muddied before, and now it is very much sort of 3 kids and me as the adult on the ship, and sort of playing this more authoritative, kingly figure. And so to have had that gap for me was actually quite a useful thing.
What was it like working with, only because I love his films, and I imagine it's working with, I don't know, the best dad ever, Michael Apted.
Michael Apted, yes.
I mean, not in a bad way. I like dads.
No,
because he's a proper grown-up and somebody that you trust with a big film.
Yes. Once you hit 70, you're definitely a grown-up. Yeah. And there's no way back from that. He's definitely grown up.
What was it like?
White beard is very, very suggestive of being grown up.
Age.
But
what was it like?
He was terrific actually. He very much sort of trusted me to sort of do my own thing to quite a good extent, because I'd sort of played the character once before, but he had I sat down with him once and he went, right, so this accent, we won't be doing that, will we? and so he had very specific ideas about what he wanted, and I went, really? Because that's part of the character? And he went, no, it's ridiculous. I said, okay, fair enough.
But,
I think also Andrew Adamson, who directed the first 2, had always said that he wanted to direct them as if how he remembered reading the books when he was 8, rather than from an adult perspective, which I think is the only way to do it. And I think, as proven by this one, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, that Michael should have the artistic license to do that same thing.
Of course.
Even though it's longer ago for him to remember being 8. But I don't think he was 8 when the books came out, in fact. But I think, really great directors kind of trust you to do what you do, but then are there to support you and answer your questions and give you little ideas and steers when you need them. And that was very much how he was with me.
I have to say, my 7-year-old thought it was amazing. Literally stood up and clapped for an hour at the end.
Well,
and I said, what would you give it out of 10? He went, I would give it 2,000 out of 18. He's not very good at maths, I'm going to be completely frank. But he loved it. But what's it like working on it? Because I imagine it's quite difficult. I love Simon Pegg as the mouse. I absolutely love him.
He's great.
But you're dealing with small people and also pretend people. Like, just pretend there's a big lion.
I think what they do is they do absolutely everything they can to make it feel as real as they can for you. They built the Dawn Treader itself to scale. We would go up 2 flights of stairs every morning onto this massive boat, which was on a peninsula with water on 3 sides. It was fantastic. You really did feel like you were on the ocean, because it was on a hydraulic gimbal, so it would twist from side to side and back and forth. Some people would get seasick even though we weren't technically in the sea.
Yeah. You mentioned the ship. I think it's time for a clip, if you wouldn't mind.
A clip of the ship.
Let's listen to a clip from The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. In this, as the Dawn Treader approaches Dark Island, Caspian delivers a stirring speech to his very brave crew. Here it is.
No matter what happens here, every soul who stands before me has earned their place on the crew of the Dawn Treader. Together we have travelled far. Together we have faced adversity. Together we can do it again. So now is not the time to fall to fierce temptations. Be strong. Never give in. Our world, our Narnian lives depend on it. Think of the lost souls we're here to save. Think of Aslan. Think of Narnia. For Narnia!
I am now thinking of Narnia. I would go into battle. I tell you that.
On the radio.
Doesn't it? The sea monster's scary.
Yes.
Let's talk about, talking of scary, how terrified were you and how elated were you when you got the part of Stephen in Birdsong, which is on stage at the moment? Because that's a big old role, but at the same time, was there part of you that thought, give it to someone else, I'm too scared?
Yes, a little bit there was. I'd read the book twice before I even thought about there being any sort of production of it, and then they were trying very hard to put together a film of it, which I'd auditioned for a couple of times actually and met sort of various directors for, and then I got a call saying that Trevor Nunn is going to direct the theatre version of Birdsong, and I thought, how on earth do you put the Battle of the Somme on the stage? It will be a disaster. But then they told me Trevor Nunn was directing it, and I thought, well, if there's one man who can put the Battle of the Somme on the stage, Trevor can.
Yeah,
and
that's practically a phrase people use throughout the
Trevor
UK.
Can.
Trevor can.
Yeah.
How am I going to... Yeah, Trevor can.
Call Trevor.
Yeah, also, but Trevor and Sebastian.
And Sebastian, folks, who is just the most lovely, generous, wonderful man. And initially was a little bit cynical about the idea of turning one of his novels into a stage play. But after he came to the first run-through we did in a rehearsal room, unannounced, by the way, 2 minutes before, I've got 3 hours of dialogue almost stored in my brain at this point, most of it anyway, and he walks through the door 1 minute before we start, and that was a terrifying moment. And actually, you asked about being elated and terrified at the same time. When I first met Sebastian, he told me 2 things, one of which made me feel very elated and excited, and one of which
made you
terrified
want to weep.
me.
Yeah.
Made me want to weep. Exactly. And the first
I said
thing...
weep, but either.
Well, we'll
go with either. Yeah.
With the first
anything that rhymes with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The first thing he said was that I just find it very strange talking to you because you look exactly like I imagined Stephen 15 years ago when I was writing this book, and it's freaking me out a little bit. He was just kind of very curiously checking out my face, but that kind of gave me some confidence that I could play this part. But it was actually sort of a ridiculous thing to feel, because actually these are entirely fictional characters in a very, very real and haunting situation, but fictional people, so I look like someone that you made up. What does that mean? But still, it felt like a bit of an honour. The other thing he said was that the story is about how far a human being can be emotionally pushed, before you can no longer call him a human being. And I thought that's
quite big to take on.
Quite a theme.
That's not just reading out lines.
That's a massive theme for a play, and it is a tough job. It's a nearly 3-hour show, and my character sort of barely leaves the stage, but it is absolutely worth it every single night. You have this wonderful sort of catharsis at the end of the play, and I have to sit down in a chair for a little bit afterwards.
I was just about to say, it's not like 3 hours of juggling. It's not like where, you know, you're going out and going, I like otters, or I don't know if there is a stage play that does that, but it should.
Yeah, you should write it. If not.
Yeah, job done. Otter song. But instead, you must feel. Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly what they sound like. By the way, it's like there's one in the room. But I imagine that you must feel emotionally wrought, emotionally drained every single night.
Yes, I do. And then the really difficult thing is to have to reset on the Thursdays and Saturdays, when you have to do it again an hour and a half later.
Oh my goodness.
It's that reset which is very, very difficult, because you can kind of play through the whole story, which is the magical thing about being in a stage play, is that you do get to share a whole story with an audience every single night, and that is the magic. That's why actors keep going back to do that, because we are storytellers, and when you're working on a film, you're working on tiny little moments. You're working, and you've got 1,000 people working on 10 seconds to make those 10 seconds the most exciting they can be, and trust that they'll fit into the story. You know, we go back to theatre because we want to tell full stories. We want to tell the entire arc of a character, which in this case happens to be quite mammoth for all the characters as well.
Thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
It sounds brilliant. Will you do Caspian again?
I will if they ask me, but I think he's quite old, so I'd have to practice my old voice.
Oh, nice. That's working well. Old plus otter. Job done.
An old otter song.
Yeah. Thank you. The Chronicles of Narnia, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, rated PG, is now on national release, and Birdsong, starring Ben Barnes, is running at London's Comedy Theatre, ironic, until January the 15th, 2011. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, thanks.
Weekend